New Mexico Territory, 1883. Noon light spilled over the market town of Calamita, turning the dust into gold shimmer. The clatter of hooves mixed with the rasp of wagon wheels, the sharp neigh of horses, the murmur of men bargaining over cattle. Heat wavered above the corrals, and the smell of sweat, leather, and cheap whiskey clung to everything that breathed. Caleb Hart stood apart from the crowd, hat pulled low, eyes narrowed against the sun. He came for a mare, not people. But the West had a way of selling more than what asked for, sometimes even his peace of mind. He moved toward the last auction pen, where a bay mare trembled on thin legs. Beside her stood a man clutching a rope and a bottle, the rope tied not to the horse, but to a girl's wrist. She couldn't have been more than 19, bare feet cracked from heat. A torn dress hung loose on her shoulders. The man's voice slurred, loud enough to slice through the noise. "Got me a deaf one here. Don't talk, don't hear, but she works clean. Comes with the horse if you pay up." Laughter rolled through the men nearby. One spat. Another muttered, "Ain't worth feedin'." Caleb turned his head away. The mare's ribs pressed sharp against her skin. He counted the coins in his palm. Enough for the horse, not for trouble. Yet something in the air shifted. He felt her eyes before he looked. The girl, Lark Whitfield, was staring straight at him. Her gaze was steady, unflinching, not pleading, not afraid, just listening, as if she could hear something in him no one else ever could. For a heartbeat, the noise around faded, replaced by the low hum of wind through wooden boards. Caleb's hand closed on his coin pouch. The drunk yanked the rope, making the girl stumble forward. "You want the mare, mister? She's tied to this one. Take both or none." Caleb hesitated, then spoke low. "How much?" $5, and you feed her yourself." The crowd chuckled. Caleb dropped the coins into the man's palm. "You're crazier than a coyote," someone jeered. Caleb didn't answer. He cut the rope from the girl's wrist, handed the drunk the frayed end, and turned to the mare. As he led the horse out, the girl followed without a word. Her steps were light but certain, like she knew the road already. At the wagon, Caleb pointed to the back. "Climb in." She obeyed, folding into the corner beside the grain sacks. He snapped the reins, and the wagon groaned forward. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the rattle of wheels and the wind pushing through sagebrush. Caleb risked a glance. She was watching the horizon, face half hidden by strands of sun-bleached hair. Her hands moved slightly on her lap, shapes without sound. He wondered if it was prayer or habit. A memory flickered. His brother Evan, dust covering his boots, saying, "This land will either break us or save us." Caleb blinked the thought away. He hadn't spoken Evan's name in 5 years. The road narrowed along a ridge. Heat shimmered like smoke. Then the mare snorted, uneasy. Lark lifted her head, eyes sharp. She tapped Caleb's arm and pointed forward. "What?" She shook her head, motioned downward. He frowned but pulled the reins. The wagon stopped. 2 seconds later, A gust tore through the ridge, a twisting dust devil exploding across the path. The wagon's rear gate ripped loose and slammed into the dirt where the horse had stood. Caleb's heart punched against his ribs. He turned to her. Lark was staring straight ahead, calm, her hand still resting on the wood rail as if she'd known the storm would come. "You felt that?" he asked. She nodded once. Then she raised 2 fingers and drew a slow spiral in the air, like the swirl of wind or water. When the dust settled, they moved on. The sun sagged low, and long shadows crawled across the plain. By the time they reached the ridge road overlooking Hart's Draw, the sky burned crimson. Caleb halted the wagon. "That's home," he said quietly. Lark followed his gaze. A lone ranch house, roof slanted, smoke curling thin from its chimney. Nothing but miles of red earth around it. As they descended, the wind carried the faint ring of a church bell from town. One Caleb hadn't heard in years. He thought of the letter still folded in his saddlebag, the one with Evan's handwriting, the words he never finished reading. At the yard gate, the mare stopped short. Lark glanced up. Her hand brushed the air again, like tracing unseen lines. Caleb noticed something dark on her wrist. A bruise, shaped like a man's grip. He looked away before she caught him staring. Inside the barn, he loosened the horse's bridle. Lark waited by the door, still silent. Caleb handed her a canteen. "Drink. Tomorrow, you work for your keep." She took it, drank once, then set it down carefully on the rail. Before he could step past, she touched his sleeve. Light. Brief. He froze. She didn't meet his eyes, just turned toward the open yard and the fading light. For the first time since the war, Caleb felt a soundless question echo inside him, one he didn't know how to answer. The wind outside shifted again, carrying the dry scent of smoke. Far behind them, beyond the ridge, a shape moved. Someone watching from the road. The glint of a flask catching the last sun. Jeb Crowley. He spat into the dirt, muttered something, and turned toward the trail leading to the Pike mine. Dawn crept over the mesas, painting the desert in ash and rose. The wagon rattled down the final slope toward Hart's Draw, a stretch of land scarred by wind and silence. Fences leaned tired, the windmill spun with a dry groan, and cattle bones glimmered like pale ghosts against red clay. Caleb Hart tightened the reins, eyes scanning the empty corrals. It wasn't much, but it was all that was left of the Hart name. He climbed down and unlatched the barn gate. The mare snorted, restless. The girl sat still in the wagon, gaze sweeping the horizon. "Come on," Caleb said. "Ain't no one gonna bite." She stepped down, bare feet sinking into the dust. When she reached the porch, she paused at a faded photograph nailed above the door. A woman holding a small boy, both smiling toward the sun. A turquoise stone hung beneath it on a thin leather cord. Lark reached out, touched it gently, then drew her hand back. Inside, the air smelled of smoke, iron, and loneliness. Caleb pointed toward the small storeroom near the back. You can sleep there. There's a blanket. She nodded, set her small cloth bundle on the floor. He watched as she looked around the house. Everything plain, worn, quiet. Isaiah Cole arrived before noon, dust covering his coat. He dismounted, tipping his hat. "Didn't figure you'd bring company," he said. Caleb shrugged. "Bought a horse, came with a person." Isaiah laughed once, short. "Hell, that's a new kind of trade." Lark appeared in the doorway, cautious. Isaiah studied her a moment, then gave a nod. "You got the look of someone who don't start trouble." She tilted her head, uncertain, then lifted her hands and shaped a sign. Flat palm down, 2 fingers tapping the air. Isaiah frowned. "She say something?" Caleb answered. "Means hello, I think." They worked through the afternoon repairing the corral. Lark moved quietly, efficient, hauling boards without being asked. When she passed Caleb a hammer, her sleeve slipped back. Dark bruises circled her wrist, old but deep. He noticed but said nothing. Instead, he handed her his canteen. She drank slowly, then offered it back with both hands. As dusk settled, the prairie cooled. The 3 ate stew from the same pot beside the hearth. No one spoke. Only the crack of wood filled the room. Isaiah broke the silence first. "You sure about keeping her here? Folks in town talk fast." Caleb stirred the stew. "Let 'em talk. I need help, and she needs a place." Isaiah nodded. "Still, that drunk who sold her, Jeb Crowley, he's trouble. Runs errands for Judge Pike. Heard they're after more land waterside." Caleb's spoon froze mid-air. "Waterside?" "Yeah. Talk is Pike's got surveyors sniffing around the old riverbed. Blue coil, they call it." Outside, the windmill clanked once, then stopped. The sound carried strange in the cooling air, like something holding its breath. Later that night, Caleb sat on the porch sharpening his knife. The moon cast pale light over the yard. From the barn came a faint rhythm, soft scraping, then stillness. He rose, gun in hand, and walked across the yard. Inside, Lark stood beside the mare, dusty, brushing its neck. The lantern beside her burned low. She didn't turn when he entered. Instead, she bent and traced something on the wooden beam near the stall. A spiral drawn in charcoal. Caleb frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" She looked over her shoulder, lifted a finger to her lips, then pointed at the ground. Her palm, flattened, pressed against the dirt floor. She waited, eyes half closed. A moment later, Caleb felt it too. A faint tremor underfoot, like a heartbeat. The horse stirred. Then it was gone. She rose and wiped the mark away with her sleeve, leaving only a gray smudge. Caleb exhaled slowly, holstered the gun. "You sense storms, earthquakes, or just ghosts?" She smiled faintly, barely there, and walked past him toward the door. When she was gone, he noticed the turquoise stone from the porch now hanging on a nail inside the barn. He hadn't moved it. By midnight, the air turned heavy. A low rumble rolled from the hills, followed by the metallic tang of ozone. Caleb opened one eye to a flicker of light through the window. Lightning far off. He rose, checked the shutters. Lark's door stood half open. She wasn't inside. He grabbed his coat and stepped out. The smell of smoke hit first. Not lightning. Fire. Flames leapt from the far corner of the barn. The wind drove sparks toward the corral. Caleb shouted, running. Isaiah burst from the bunkhouse with a bucket. Together they fought the blaze, coughing, kicking sand, throwing water till their arms ached. The mare screamed from inside. Caleb tore the latch loose, dragged Dusty out just before the roof beam gave way. When the fire died, only blackened wood remained. Isaiah knelt, brushing soot from his arm. "That wasn't random," he said. Caleb nodded toward the ground near the fence. Boot prints, heavy, iron X nails. Isaiah scowled. "That's minor work. Pike's men again." Caleb didn't answer. He turned to find Lark standing near the well, hair wild, face streaked with ash. She held something small in her hand, a single turquoise bead. He walked over, recognized it instantly. "That was hanging on my wall." She opened her palm. The bead glinted faintly under moonlight. Then she pointed toward the horizon, where the darkness seemed thicker. He followed her gaze. Far out, a light flickered once, then vanished. "Someone's still out there," he said. Isaiah spat into the dirt. "Then we ain't sleeping tonight." The three stood in silence, smoke curling upward like a warning. Behind them, the spiral mark on the beam had survived the flames, faint but visible, burned into the wood as if the fire itself had traced it deeper. Morning broke with the low cry of cattle and the hiss of wind over dry grass. Smoke from the burned barn still lingered in the air, thin as memory. Caleb Hart rose early, boots crunching over blackened earth, surveying the damage. A third of his haystock, gone. He spat dust, then looked toward the well. Lark Whitfield was already there, drawing water with steady rhythm. She wore his old flannel shirt, tied at the waist, sleeves rolled. The same girl who'd barely spoken now moved like she belonged to the silence itself. "Startin' before sunrise," Caleb said. Lark glanced up, wiped sweat from her brow, then gestured. Flat palm down, slow sweep forward. "You mean work?" he guessed. She nodded once and went back to hauling water. By noon, the ranch breathed again. Caleb fixed fence posts while Isaiah Cole repaired the roof. Lark cleaned the kitchen, her motions neat, almost ritual. She didn't hum, didn't sigh, just worked with a calm that unsettled him. Each time she passed, Caleb caught the faint scent of smoke and sage on her clothes. At lunch, they sat on the porch, bowls of beans between them. The desert wind stirred dust devils in the distance. Isaiah broke a biscuit, tossing half to the dog. "So, what's the plan, boss? We just wait for Pike's men to torch the rest?" Caleb chewed slow. "I'll ride into town tomorrow, ask questions. Asking gets you bullets these days. Then maybe I'll do the talking quiet." Lark set her bowl down, picked up a piece of chalk from the shelf, and scribbled on the porch plank. "Wind smells like copper." Caleb frowned. "What's that mean?" She pointed north, toward the hills where Pike's mine sat hidden beyond the ridge. He caught her meaning. Smoke, metal, trouble. After Isaiah left to check the herd, Caleb led Dusty to water. The mare stopped short, ears twitching. Lark approached, hands gentle. She pressed her palms against the horse's flank, eyes closed, breathing in rhythm. The mare relaxed. Caleb watched, arms folded. "You do that with people too?" She looked up, tapped her chest twice, then his, and shrugged. He almost smiled. Fair answer. Inside the house, Lark found a small slate board and began leaving notes. Bacon low, dog limping, sky tastes like rain. Her handwriting was thin and careful, as if she feared words might break. Caleb started replying beneath each line. Short answers, plain, but it became their conversation. Later that day, while fixing the windmill, Caleb noticed the ground tremble again, faint but certain. The blades above him shuddered. A whisper of pressure passed through the air. He looked down to see Lark standing at the base, both hands pressed to the post. She mouthed one word: down. Before he could ask, the windmill's top bolt snapped. The metal vane spun free, crashing into the dirt where he'd been standing seconds before. Caleb staggered back, heart hammering. He stared at her. "You knew that'd happen?" She knelt, traced a line in the dirt. 2 circles connected by a wave. That night, lightning flickered far off again. Caleb sat by the hearth, mending his saddle strap. Lark brought him coffee in a small wooden box she'd found near the barn ruins. Inside were burned papers and a piece of leather stamped with the Hart family crest. Caleb froze. "Where'd you get this?" She pointed to the ashes. He picked up the fragment. Part of a contract. Only a few words legible. Blue coil, water rights. Judge M. Pike. The room seemed to shrink. He felt Evan's ghost again, whispering from the past. "We own nothing that isn't paid in blood." Caleb rose, shoved the papers into his coat. "You keep this between us," he said. Lark nodded, but her eyes asked a question he couldn't read. Outside, the wind changed direction, carrying a smell like wet stone. Somewhere beyond the ridge, thunder grumbled, though the sky was clear. Before dawn, he woke to a faint creak. From the porch, he saw Lark standing by the corral, looking east. Her hair moved with the wind, hands still. "What is it now?" he muttered, stepping beside her. She pointed toward the horizon. A thin column of smoke rose behind the ridge. Not fire, signal smoke. Isaiah appeared from the bunkhouse, rifle slung. "That's miner talk. They're marking ground." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Ground that ain't theirs." He turned to Lark. "You said wind smells like copper. You were right." She blinked, then bent to draw again in the dust. This time a spiral with a crack running through it. Beneath it, she etched one more word: danger. Caleb stared at the drawing until the wind erased half of it. Then he looked toward the hills, toward the place his brother once called a blessing. Isaiah said quietly behind him, Guess the land's starting to talk again. Yeah, Caleb replied. And maybe this time, I'll listen. As they spoke, a lone rider appeared on the far ridge, black hat low, watching. The glint of metal flashed on his saddle, an insignia from the Pike Mining Company. He turned his horse and vanished into the haze. Caleb exhaled through his teeth, checked the revolver at his hip. Time 400 mounds. The calm morning was gone. Something darker pressed in from the desert. Lark touched his sleeve, then pointed once more to the ground. He followed her gaze to the cracked spiral fading in the dust, its shape matching the scar carved into the rock face beyond Hart's draw. The morning sun burned pale through the haze, turning the desert into a sea of copper light. The smell of ash still clung to the ranch, though 3 days had passed since the fire. Caleb Hart hitched Dusty to the post and checked the sky. Flat, cloudless, yet heavy somehow. Lark Whitfield moved quietly behind him, carrying buckets toward the trough. Her steps were light, but each seemed to listen for something beneath the surface. He caught her glance toward the northern ridge, where a faint plume of smoke drifted. "Still smell that copper wind?" he asked. She paused, then nodded. He wanted to believe it was just miners working the Pike claim, but the sound that rode the wind, a distant thud, repeating steady as a drum, made him uneasy. By noon, the dust on the road shimmered with heat. A rider approached from the west, moving slow, wrapped in a blanket of ochre cloth. When he drew near, Caleb recognized him. Adaya Nantan, a mescalero healer he hadn't seen since the war ended. The man dismounted, dark braids streaked with gray, eyes calm as stone. "Been a long while, Hart." Caleb nodded. "Still fix what the desert breaks?" Adaya smiled faintly. "Only what the desert lets me." Lark appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her skirt. Adaya looked her over, then set down his saddlebag. "You keep strange company." "She ain't trouble," Caleb said. "Just quiet." Adaya tilted his head. "Quiet can be dangerous. Sometimes it hears too much." Caleb frowned, but didn't reply. They walked the property together. Adaya knelt near the dry creek bed that once cut through Hart's draw. He scooped a handful of dust, let it fall through his fingers. "This land used to hum," he said. "Now it sleeps wrong." "You talk like it's alive." "It is. Blue coil ran under here. Our people called it the water that remembers. But someone's bleeding it from the mountain." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Pike's mine." Adaya looked up. "Your brother made deal with that man long ago. Signed paper for water rights." Caleb said nothing. He'd read enough of that burned contract to know the truth. Inside the barn, Lark brushed Dusty's coat, listening as the men spoke. She drew a spiral in the dust at her feet, added a single line through its center. When she noticed Caleb watching, she wiped it away quickly. "You've seen that mark before," Adaya said quietly. "On the rocks near Blue Coil. It warns of imbalance. If the earth keeps shaking, the spring will burst or vanish." Caleb leaned on the post. "And what would you have me do, dig up a ghost?" Adiah met his gaze. Maybe bury one instead. That evening, Isaiah rode in from town with news. He dropped a folded handbill onto the table. Notice of survey, authorized by Judge Malcolm Pike. They're running lines 2 miles north. Looks like they're claiming everything up to the ridge. Caleb cursed under his breath. That's my boundary. Not on their map, it ain't. Lark reached for the paper, studied the marks carefully. Then she took a lump of charcoal and drew a thin, twisting line beside Pike's survey. It curved beneath the printed border and ended in a circle near their barn. She tapped it twice, looked at Caleb. She says there's water under us, Isaiah guessed. Adiah nodded. She's right. The air grew still. Outside, the windmill creaked once and stopped, the blades turning backward for half a breath. Lark stiffened, her hand rising instinctively to her chest. Another tremor? Caleb asked. She pointed north again. At sundown, they climbed the ridge. From there, the whole valley spread wide, painted in gold and red. Caleb spotted movement at the foot of the hill. 2 wagons, men in miner coats unloading crates marked with red paint. Dynamite. Son of a, he muttered. Isaiah lifted his spyglass. They're digging near the dry bed. That's blue coil, ain't it? Caleb nodded. They're after the water. Adiah murmured a short prayer in his own tongue. Lark, standing beside him, echoed the final word with her hands, the shape soft and circular. Caleb glanced at her. You understand him? She wrote quickly in the dirt with her finger, the ground told me. Night settled heavy. The group returned to the ranch in silence. As they reached the gate, Caleb noticed a strange shimmer on the fence post. A symbol carved into the wood, fresh, the same spiral with a crack. Isaiah touched it. That wasn't there this morning. Someone's playing games, Caleb said. They ate dinner in quiet. Adiah sat by the fire, humming a low tune that seemed older than language. Lark listened, her eyes distant. Caleb poured whiskey into a tin cup and stared into the flames. You think this land's cursed? Adiah shook his head. Not cursed, just tired of being stolen. When the fire burned low, Lark rose and walked outside. The moon hung like a thin coin. She knelt, pressed her palms to the earth. The ground trembled, soft, steady, as if answering her. In the distance, faint as breath, came the clang of metal on stone, the miners striking deeper. Caleb joined her, boots crunching softly. You can feel it, can't you? She nodded, drew another spiral with her finger. What's it say? He asked. She looked up at him, lips barely moving. Danger. He crouched beside her. I've been living with danger all my life. Lark shook her head and pointed toward the ridge where the dynamite wagons waited. The wind shifted, bringing the metallic scent of powder. This ain't just mine trouble, Isaiah said behind them. This is war over water. Caleb stood, jaw set. Then we'll make sure it's one they can't win. Far off, a torch flared to life near the Pike camp, burning against the night. For a heartbeat, the light formed the shape of a spiral in smoke. then vanished into the dark. Afternoon heat weighed heavy on the town of Calamita. Dust hung like fog as Caleb Hart tied his horse outside the saloon Estrella. The sign creaked in the wind, half its paint peeled. Inside, piano keys clattered off-beat, while a drunk argued over poker chips. Caleb pushed through the crowd until he reached the counter, where Rosa Delgado poured whiskey with a steady hand and eyes that missed nothing. "Haven't seen you since the fire," she said. "Word travels," Caleb replied. "In this town it runs faster than water. What brings you in?" "Questions. Dangerous habit." She slid him a glass anyway. He leaned close. "Pike's men are moving north. You hear what they're after?" Rosa dried a glass with a rag. "Same thing they're always after. Land they don't own, and secrets they can't keep." Caleb waited. She sighed. "There's a mail wagon coming through Coyote Pass at dawn. Carries a ledger. Contracts. Water rights. Maybe your brother's name inked in it." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You sure?" "Sure as sin. The one garden it wears a star. Sheriff Kepler." Outside, boots scraped on gravel. Isaiah Cole stepped through the doors, hat low, scanning the room. "Figured I'd find you in trouble," he muttered. Caleb stood. "We got a lead." Rosa poured Isaiah a shot. "You boys thinking of robbing the county mail?" "Borrowing," Isaiah said. "We'll return what don't matter." Rosa shook her head. "Just don't bleed on my floor." Caleb turned to leave, but Rosa caught his arm. "Hart, word is, that girl with you, the quiet one? Folks say she's got witch ears. Be careful who hears her name." He met her gaze. "She ain't the witch in this story." "Maybe not, but she'll draw fire all the same." They rode out under a red sky, dust trailing like smoke behind them. The desert stretched wide, dotted with cacti and bones of old cattle. Halfway to the ridge, they spotted Lark Whitfield walking toward them from the direction of the ranch, her skirts whipped by wind. Caleb reined in. "You were told to stay put." She reached into her satchel, pulled out a small chalkboard, and wrote, "I see the path." Isaiah sighed. "She's coming. You ain't stopping her." Caleb cursed softly, but nodded. "Stay close, then." By midnight, they reached the mouth of Coyote Pass, a narrow gorge cut through red stone. Crickets chirped in the scrub. The air hummed with dry electricity. They hid behind a ridge, waiting. Lark crouched between them, eyes fixed on the road like a hunter's. Caleb whispered, "You hear anything?" She shook her head, then pointed upward, meaning feel, not hear. He frowned but said nothing. Hours crawled. Just before dawn, a wagon appeared, wheels grinding, lantern dim. 2 riders flanked it. One carried a rifle. The other wore a sheriff's badge glinting faint in the half-light. Isaiah chambered around. "That's Kepler, all right." Caleb checked his revolver. "We take the lead horse, stop the wagon, grab the ledger, and get out." But Lark tugged his sleeve, drawing quick marks in the dirt. 3 others, behind. Caleb blinked, looked through the shadows. She was right. More riders keeping distance. Ambush, Isaiah whispered. Looks that way. Caleb's mind raced. Pike wouldn't trust the sheriff alone. This was bait. The first wagon reached the bend. Caleb whistled low. Isaiah fired into the air. Just one shot. The lead horse reared. The wagon swerved. Caleb rushed forward, grabbed the reins, yelling, "Hold it!" Kepler swung his rifle but froze when he saw who it was. "Hart, you got a death wish?" "Just need the ledger, Tom. It's county property. Belongs to me more than him." Before Kepler could answer, shots cracked from the ridge. Bullets splintered the wagon boards. Pike's riders charged in, faces wrapped with scarves. Lark ducked behind the wheel, covering her head. Caleb fired back, one clean shot dropping a rider. Isaiah took another. Horses screamed, dust exploded. Through the chaos, Lark crawled toward the wagon door. She saw a leather satchel hanging inside, the edge of a paper ledger glowing white in the dark. She grabbed it, but a bullet tore the strap. She fell hard, clutching the bag. Caleb saw her and ran, sliding across the gravel to shield her. "Got it?" he asked. She nodded, pressing the satchel to her chest. "Then run." They dashed toward the rocks as Kepler's men returned fire. "Stop!" the sheriff shouted. "You'll hang for this." "Maybe," Caleb shot back, "but not today." They reached cover behind a boulder. Isaiah whistled the horses around. Caleb lifted Lark onto the saddle, tossed the satchel to Isaiah. "Take it home. I'll slow them down." Isaiah hesitated. "You sure?" "Go!" He turned, firing 3 quick shots to scatter the riders. Lark looked back once, eyes wide with something between warning and plea. Caleb mouthed, "Trust me." The dust settled as the sun climbed. When the echoes died, Caleb realized the riders were gone. But so was the sheriff. Only empty shells littered the pass. He climbed up the ridge and scanned the road. In the distance, he saw Kepler riding hard toward the valley, one hand pressed to his coat, where the badge used to be. Behind him, hoofbeats faded. Lark and Isaiah were gone, heading for Hart's draw. The desert stretched silent, but the wind carried a whisper, like water moving underground. Caleb wiped blood from his arm and picked up a fallen piece of paper torn from the ledger. A single line remained. Property transfer. Hart family. Blue coil rights. M. Pike. He folded it slowly. "So that's your game," he muttered. The sun climbed slow over the red cliffs of Coyote Pass, lighting every scar and shadow of the rocks. Lark Whitfield sat astride the mare Dusty, the stolen satchel clutched tight against her chest. Isaiah Cole rode beside her, keeping low, scanning the ridges. Behind them, the wind carried the echo of gunfire from town, faint but persistent. Caleb was still out there. They pushed hard until the path widened into a basin of shale and dry brush. Isaiah pulled the reins. "We'll rest the horses. Wait for Hart to catch up." Lark slid from the saddle, boots stirring dust. She opened the satchel. Inside, the ledger bound in cracked leather, stamped with Judge Pike's seal. She flipped it open. Rows of names, numbers, maps drawn in hurried ink. Then one line stopped her. Evan Hart, Blue Coil Water Grant, 1880. Her fingers trembled. The same surname, the same land. She turned another page. Attached was a small folded note, half burned at the edge. She couldn't read all the words, but one line stood clear. Drill beneath the draw. She looked up sharply. Isaiah saw her expression. Bad news? She wrote quickly in the dirt. He sold the water. Isaiah spat. Figures. Pike's been stealing since the war ended. Hoofbeats echoed from the pass entrance. Lark stiffened. Isaiah raised his rifle. A lone figure emerged through the dust. Caleb riding hard, blood on his sleeve. You're late, Isaiah called. Had to shake the law, Caleb said, sliding off his horse. Kepler's dirty. Pike owns him. He looked at Lark. You all right? She nodded, handed him the ledger. He flipped through it fast. His brother's signature burning into his eyes. Damn you, Evan, he whispered. Before Isaiah could speak, the ground rumbled. A deep, slow vibration rolling through the stone. Lark pressed her palm to the earth. Her eyes widened. She pointed toward the cliffs. Get down, Caleb shouted. A split second later, the ridge exploded. Dust and rock rained down. Pike's riders burst from the smoke, guns flashing. The ambush was complete. Caleb dove behind a boulder, firing back. Isaiah returned shots, clean and calm. Bullets sparked off stone. One horse screamed and bolted. Lark crawled behind the wagon, clutching the satchel to keep it safe. A voice echoed through the canyon, sharp, mocking. Give it up, Hart. That paper belongs to the court. Sheriff Tom Kepler stepped into view, rifle aimed steady. Don't make me drop you. Caleb rose halfway from cover. Drop me or yourself, your choice. Kepler fired first. The bullet tore through Caleb's hat brim. Isaiah answered with a shot that clipped the sheriff's shoulder, spinning him backward. That's for the badge you sold, Isaiah shouted. Lark peeked over the wagon edge, saw the miners circling. She picked up a loose horseshoe and tossed it against a rock. The clang drew one rider's aim. Caleb saw the flash of movement and fired. One shot clean through the man's chest. Smoke thickened, turning sunlight into blood-red haze. The echoes of gunfire tangled with shouts and hoofbeats until the canyon seemed alive. When the last echo faded, silence settled heavy. Dust drifted down like snow. Isaiah wiped his brow. That all of them? For now, Caleb said. He looked around. Where's the sheriff? Kepler was gone. Only a trail of blood led into the deeper cut of the canyon. Caleb loaded a fresh round. He's heading for Pike. Isaiah nodded. We go after him? Caleb shook his head. Not yet. We need to see what Pike's hiding. Lark touched his sleeve, then pointed toward the fallen rocks. Beneath the debris, a narrow gap revealed a glimmer of water seeping through stone. Cold, clear, impossible in this desert. Blue coil, Caleb breathed. Isaiah knelt, still alive. Lark knelt beside them, pressed her palm flat. The ground pulsed faintly beneath her hand, as if answering her touch. Caleb stared at the water, then at the ledger. Evan knew. He sold this, our family's own sin. Isaiah frowned. Maybe it ain't too late to buy it back. Not with gold, Caleb said. With truth. They buried the dead, covered the tracks. When night fell, they camped at the mouth of the canyon. The ledger lay open beside the fire. Lark traced the inked spiral drawn on one page, an old surveyor's mark showing the path of an underground vein. She pointed to it, then to the horizon. You think it runs under the ranch? Caleb asked. She nodded. He stared into the flames. If Pike drains it dry, this land's finished. Isaiah poked at the fire. Then we drain him first. The night wind carried the smell of sulfur, mine dust, blasting powder. Lark wrote on the dirt again. They dig tonight. Caleb looked toward the dark hills. Somewhere out there, faint lights flickered along the ridge like fireflies. We'll hit the mine before dawn, he said. Isaiah smirked. Guess we ain't sleeping again. Caleb turned to Lark. You sure about this? She nodded. Then, with her finger, she drew two shapes in the dust. A circle for the land, a wave beneath it for the water. Between them, she traced a small heart. He understood. This isn't just his fight anymore. The fire snapped. Distant thunder rolled again. Not sky thunder, but the dull, hungry roar of another blast. Caleb rose, grabbed his hat. That's the sound of Pike opening hell. Midnight weighed heavy over Calamita. The sheriff's jail stood at the edge of town, its iron bars gleaming faint in lantern light. Inside, Lark Whitfield sat on the floor, wrists bound loosely with rope. The air reeked of dust and oil. Outside the window, she could hear the low whistle of miners on night shift, each tone echoing through her ribs like a warning. Hours earlier, Caleb had sent her with Isaiah to hide the ledger near the ranch. But fate turned fast in the west. Pike's riders had intercepted them by the creek. Isaiah fought two off before they dragged Lark away. She hadn't screamed, only stared at the sky, memorizing the stars above the ridge so she'd know her way back. Now she waited in the dark, tracing the wall with her fingertips. The stone was damp. Water shouldn't be there. She pressed harder and felt a vibration. Steady, distant, rhythmic. Not thunder, not footsteps. Machines. Boots clacked outside. The cell door swung open. Sheriff Tom Kepler limped in, shoulder bandaged from the shootout. You cause more trouble than you look worth, he said. Where's Hart? Lark said nothing, eyes fixed on his badge. He followed her stare, half smiled. Yeah, I still wear it. Habit, I guess. He crouched, voice low. Pike says you're special. Says you can feel things before they happen. That true? She looked past him, to the cracks in the wall. I'll take that as a yes. He stood, knocking dust from his boots. He wants to talk to you. Guess he thinks you can find his water for him. Lark blinked slow. Then she tilted her head, listening. Kepler frowned. What's that? A faint tremor ran underfoot. The lamp flickered. Lark's eyes widened. She pointed at the wall. Kepler turned. For a second he thought he saw the mortar shift. Then the light steadied. "Damn, mine's getting too close," he muttered, walking out. When the door shut, Lark slid closer to the crack. From within came a whisper of air, cool and wet. She pressed her ear against it. The sound grew clearer. Metal striking rock, the same rhythm she'd felt before. She realized the jail was built above an old supply tunnel, one connected to Pike's main shaft. She waited till the guard dozed off, then reached into her boot. Inside the sole she'd hidden a small nail, flattened and sharp. It took minutes, but the rope gave way. She slipped free, then moved to the wall. Using the nail, she widened the crack until a piece of brick fell loose, revealing darkness beyond. She crawled through, dirt coating her palms, until she dropped into a narrow passage smelling of oil and damp clay. Lanterns flickered in metal brackets, left by miners. She followed the airflow downhill. Each step pulsed with the hum of hidden machines. After 100 yards, she stopped. The tunnel opened into a wider shaft, where water pooled shallow over the floor. She knelt, touched it. It vibrated faintly, alive. Overhead, thick pipes ran toward the north ridge. One was stamped with Pike's insignia. She turned a corner and froze. Voices echoed. "Drill faster, boys. Pike wants the pump running by sunrise. Heard Hart's got the ledger. Then he's a dead man by dawn." She backed away, heart hammering, and nearly stumbled into a shadow, someone blocking her path. A figure raised a lantern. It was Rosa Delgado. "Easy, kid," Rosa hissed. "Ain't here to hurt you. Time 400 mums." Lark blinked, confused. Rosa grinned. "Kepler hired me once to run whiskey through these tunnels. I know every rat hole. Come on." They crept through the dark until they reached a junction. Rosa pointed upward. "That ladder leads to the old stable behind Pike's storehouse. You climb. I'll stall the guards." Lark hesitated. Rosa handed her a folded scrap of paper. "Give this to Hart. It's the map of every tunnel under this damn town. Might save your lives." Lark wrote quickly on her slate. "Why help?" Rosa smiled tiredly. "'Cause I'm tired of serving thieves." Lark climbed. Halfway up, the tunnel shook violently. A blast roared from somewhere deep below. Dust rained down. Rosa shouted, "Go!" When Lark surfaced, she emerged into a narrow alley behind Pike's warehouse. Smoke poured from the mine vents in the distance, orange against the night. She ran toward the open desert, clutching the map. At Hart's draw, Caleb and Isaiah were patching the fence when they saw her silhouette staggering over the ridge. Caleb dropped his hammer, ran to her. "What happened?" She pressed the paper into his hand. The edges were smeared with soot, but the lines were clear. Tunnels, pumps, veins of water, all leading beneath their land. At the bottom, one note in Rosa's handwriting. "Pike's next blast will drain Blue Coil by dawn." Isaiah swore. "That son of a—" Caleb unfolded the map fully, jaw tightening. "Then we hit him first." Lark shook her head fiercely and wrote on her slate, "Too deep, flood." He read the word, eyes darkening. "Flood?" She nodded, drew a wave over the tunnel lines. Caleb stared at the map, then at the horizon glowing red with mine fires. "Then we drown his sins before he drowns this land." He looked at Isaiah. "Saddle up. We ride now." As they mounted, thunder rolled, not from the sky, but from beneath, like the earth groaning. The ground quivered under the horses' hooves. Lark turned once toward the town. Somewhere under those lights, Rosa would be facing the men she'd betrayed. Caleb whispered, "Hold on, Rosa. We're coming." They rode into the dark, toward the mouth of the mine, following the pulse of the land that still tried to breathe. Dawn bled slow across the desert, washing the hills in bruised gold. The air carried the tang of ash and iron. Caleb Hart spread the tunnel map across his kitchen table, tracing each dark line with a calloused finger. Lark Whitfield stood near the door, her hair tangled with dust, eyes rimmed red but steady. Isaiah Cole leaned on the windowsill, rifle slung low, watching smoke rise from the north ridge. "That maps the whole skeleton of the mine," Isaiah said. "Pike's veins run under half this valley." Caleb nodded grimly. "Including under us." He pointed to a symbol near the barn, 3 circles joined by a wave. "Blue coil, the spring's heart." Lark came closer, tapping the same mark, then drawing a single downward arrow on her slate. "They'll break through here." Caleb rubbed his jaw. "How long till dawn?" Isaiah checked his watch. 2 hours. Caleb's gaze drifted to the ledger beside the map. He opened it to the page that bore his brother's signature. The ink had bled, but the words still cut deep. Evan Hart, granting water rights to M. Pike in exchange for debt forgiveness. He whispered, "You sold the land's soul, brother." A faint tremor ran through the floorboards. Dust sifted from the rafters. Lark stiffened, looking toward the hills. Caleb closed the book. "We move now." They saddled the horses, riding north beneath a paling sky. The wind smelled of salt and sulfur. At the edge of the ridge, the entrance to Pike's main shaft gaped wide, guarded by 2 wagons and a handful of armed miners half asleep. Caleb raised his hand for silence. "We slip in quiet," he said. Isaiah grinned. "When have we ever done quiet?" "Then we do it fast." Lark pointed to a side path cutting through the rocks. Her fingers moved quick. Smaller tunnel, less men. Caleb nodded. "Lead the way." They moved through the shadows, boots sinking in loose gravel. The deeper they went, the cooler the air became, the smell turning wet and metallic. The walls glistened with moisture. Water was close. Half a mile in, the passage widened into a cavern lit by lanterns hung from hooks. A pool of murky water gleamed at its center, fed by a slow trickle from the ceiling. Pipes ran from it into the rock, draining, redirecting. Caleb crouched beside one, feeling the faint vibration through the metal. "They've already tapped it." Lark touched the ground, frowning. The tremor beneath her palm pulsed irregular, strained. She wrote, It's dying. They pressed on. Further down, the tunnel split in two. From the right came voices. They ducked behind crates, peering through the shadows. Judge Malcolm Pike stood near a wooden table stacked with ledgers and maps, coat immaculate despite the grime. Sheriff Kepler, pale and bandaged, leaned nearby. "Once this blast clears the last barrier," Pike was saying, "we'll have the entire aquifer under our control. The government contracts will triple our profit." Kepler shifted uneasily. "What about the Hart boy? He's liable to fight." Pike smiled thin. "Then we make him a martyr. Tragic end to a guilty name." He tapped a paper on the table. Evan Hart's signature sealed it. Blood buys land, and his family already paid. Caleb's hand clenched around his revolver. Isaiah shook his head slightly. "Not yet," he whispered. But Caleb stepped forward. "You talk about blood, Pike. Let's spill some of yours." Pike froze. Kepler's hand went to his gun. A shot cracked first from Isaiah's side, knocking the lantern off the table. Darkness erupted, broken only by muzzle flashes. Men shouted. Lark ducked behind a cart, covering her ears from the roar. Kepler lunged toward her, shouting, "Grab the girl!" But the ground groaned beneath them. A deep, hollow boom rolled through the tunnel. The pre-blast charge. Dust fell in sheets. Pike shouted, "Damn fools! You said it early!" The walls trembled. Cracks split the ceiling. Water spurted from fissures, spraying cold mist. Caleb grabbed Lark's arm. "Move!" They bolted down the left shaft. Isaiah fired behind them, covering their retreat. At a bend, Caleb turned back to see Pike staggering, half his coat drenched, papers scattering like dead leaves. The man screamed something lost in the noise as a surge of muddy water crashed through the tunnel, sweeping him off his feet. Lark stumbled, the current tugging her boots. Caleb caught her, pulled her through a sentient passage. They burst into an old maintenance shaft, barely wide enough to crawl. Behind them, the flood roared closer. Isaiah crawled last, gasping. "We're not outrunning it." Caleb looked ahead. Faint light glimmered through wooden slats. "That's daylight. Go." They broke through the boards, tumbling out into open air just as a torrent of black water exploded from the tunnel mouth, tearing through the valley below. The blast thunder rolled, echoing for miles. For a long moment they lay there, breathing hard. Lark sat up, staring at the flood carving through the dirt toward Hart's draw. The water shimmered under the rising sun, carrying fragments of wood, ore, and something deeper, life itself returning. Isaiah wiped mud from his face. "We just baptized the desert." Caleb looked back at the smoking tunnel. "No. We drowned a sin." Lark reached into her pocket, pulled out the turquoise stone he'd thought lost in the fire. She placed it in his palm, closed his fingers around it. He understood. The land forgives only when man does. From far off came another sound, a single rifle shot. Caleb turned toward town. The echo carried long and low. "Rosa," he murmured. Lark pressed her hand to his chest, then pointed to the horizon. We go back. The valley still steamed from the flood. Mud and broken timbers lay scattered where Pike's tunnels had once bled the earth. Caleb Hart rode slow through the wreckage, water dripping from the brim of his hat. Lark Whitfield followed behind, her eyes sweeping the drowned canyon as if listening for a heartbeat. Isaiah Cole brought up the rear, rifle across his saddle. No birds sang, no wind moved, just the soft hiss of water retreating into new cracks below. They reached the ridge above the main shaft. Smoke rose from the collapsed entrance, black and oily. A dozen miners milled near the wreck, coughing, dragging crates, shouting orders. Over them stood Sheriff Tom Kepler, arm in a sling, face pale but resolute. His badge was gone, replaced by a blood-stained bandana around his chest. Caleb studied him through the glass of his spy lens. He's still breathing. Isaiah squinted. And still taking orders. You think Pike survived that? Devils like him don't drown easy, Caleb said. They dismounted in the scrub and crept closer, keeping to the shadows. The air stank of powder. Lark crouched, pressed her hand to the ground, then wrote on her slate. New tunnel below. They dig again. Isaiah hissed. After that flood? Those bastards never quit. Caleb nodded grimly. We end it tonight. As twilight deepened, they slipped down the slope. Lark guided them by instinct more than sight, leading to a fissure half hidden behind fallen rock. Inside, the air was cold, breathing damp against their faces. Their lanterns cast long shadows across dripping walls. 50 yards in, the passage widened into an open chamber. Pump wheels groaned somewhere below, driven by a stubborn steam engine. The sound echoed like a dying heartbeat. A sheet of water trickled down from a puom. Crack in the roof, glimmering in the lantern light. Caleb stepped forward, boots splashing. This is it, the lower vein. Isaiah pointed to a ladder descending into darkness. That noise is coming from down there. Lark touched Caleb's arm, wrote quickly. Danger. Air too tight. He nodded. We won't stay long. They descended one by one. The lower shaft smelled of rust and fear. Wooden beams creaked under strain. At the bottom, light spilled from a side corridor. Voices carried. Get the pump running, or Pike'll have our hides. He's gone, fool. No one lived through that flood. Then why'd Kepler keep the engine burning? Said he had orders. Caleb exchanged a look with Isaiah. Guess our sheriff ain't done choosing sides. They crept toward the voices. Around the bend, Kepler stood before a control valve, lantern in hand. His face was drawn, hollow. He looked up as Caleb stepped into the light. Didn't figure you'd survive, Kepler said. Guess the land ain't done with me, Caleb replied. Kepler sighed. You don't understand, Hart. Pike's dead, sure, but those contracts live on. If the pumps stop, this town starves. The investors will burn us all. Then let it burn, Caleb said. Your brother made this mess, Kepler snapped. You think drowning the valley fixes what he started? Caleb raised his revolver. No, but it ends it. Before he could fire, a new tremor rattled the beams. A burst of water sprayed through a seam in the wall. Kepler turned, horror dawning. "You hit the main feed," Isaiah shouted. "Back! It's gonna blow!" The walls groaned. Lark grabbed Caleb's sleeve, pointing to a side tunnel half-blocked by debris. They ran, water chasing their heels. Kepler stayed, fumbling with the valve wheel, shouting curses drowned by the roar. The tunnel exploded in white spray. Caleb and the others tumbled into a storage chamber, coughing, soaked. The ground quaked. In the flicker of the lantern, Lark's eyes shone wide. She touched the wall, feeling the vibration pulse like thunder. She wrote on her slate, "He's gone." Isaiah caught his breath. Good riddance. But the relief died quick. The water pressure rose again, this time from above. Cracks split open, pouring muddy torrents. Caleb shoved crates against the gap, but they burst apart. "We need a way out," he shouted. Lark scanned the ceiling. Her gaze locked on a rusted grate near the top, faint moonlight seeping through. She motioned upward. Caleb boosted her onto his shoulders, Isaiah pushing from below. She pried the bars with her knife until one snapped free. Cold night air rushed in. "Go!" Isaiah climbed first, then reached down to pull Lark through. Caleb followed last, boots slipping on wet stone. Behind him, the chamber caved, swallowing the tunnel in a surge of black water. They collapsed onto the ridge, gasping. The full moon hung over the valley, turning the flood below silver. Silence followed. Heavy, endless. Isaiah sat up, breathing hard. "Kepler's dead. So's the mine." Caleb shook his head slowly. "Maybe not the town, though." He looked down at the ledger still strapped to his chest. The ink was smeared beyond saving, but one page remained legible. Rosa's map, the lines now intersecting where the water burst. She was right. The spring's open again. Lark knelt, palms pressed to the ground. The tremor beneath her hand was steady now, alive but calm. She smiled faintly, the first real peace he'd seen in her face. Caleb sank beside her, mud streaking his coat. "It's over." Isaiah chuckled. "Ain't never over. Folks'll come sniffin' again soon as the water runs clear. Then we'll be ready." They sat in silence, listening to the low murmur of new streams winding through the valley. From somewhere below came one final echo, a hollow clang, metal against stone, fading into the dark. Caleb glanced toward the ruined shaft. "That sound, what is it?" Isaiah shrugged. "Ghosts, maybe." Lark traced words on her slate. "The land remembers." The storm rolled in before dawn, born from the desert itself. A wall of dust rose on the horizon, swallowing the moonlight and turning the world copper gray. Caleb Hart cinched his coat tighter, scanning the ridge. "They're coming fast," he said. Isaiah Cole checked his rifle. "Pike's mercs don't quit easy. Looks like half the territory's riding to finish the job." Beside them, Lark Whitfield stood barefoot on the dirt, eyes closed, palms down. The ground trembled faintly under her touch. When she looked up, her lips formed one word: many. Caleb loaded his revolver. Then we don't wait here. He nodded toward the canyon where the old railway bridge cut across the floodplain. Sable Bridge. If they're moving explosives by rail like Rosa warned, we end it there. They mounted up, riding hard through the swirling grit. Wind tore at their clothes, sand stinging skin. The horses' hooves vanished into the dust storm, each breath tasting of metal and fear. By mid-morning, they reached the edge of the canyon. The bridge loomed ahead, a skeleton of timber and iron spanning the chasm, trembling under the wind. Below, the floodwaters from Blue Coil raged, swollen with debris. A locomotive sat halfway across, black smoke billowing. Men shouted orders, stacking crates marked explosives, property of Pike Mining Company. Isaiah spat. That's enough powder to blow the whole ridge. Caleb narrowed his eyes. They're gonna collapse the source, bury the spring for good. He turned to Lark. Can you feel where the vein runs? She crouched, pressed her hands to the ground, then pointed under the far end of the bridge. That's where it breathes, she wrote on her slate. The plan formed quick and desperate. Time 400 melms. Isaiah would circle east to cut the track. Caleb would draw the guards. Lark, lightest of them all, would crawl beneath the bridge to unfasten the fuse lines. No time for second guesses. Caleb gave her a small pouch, a strip of braided horsehair and the turquoise stone. If this goes south, you keep that. She shook her head, pressing it back into his hand. Then she signed, simple, you keep hope. They split. Isaiah vanished into the swirling red fog. Caleb walked his horse out onto the open railbed, coat flapping. The nearest foreman squinted through the haze. Who the hell? Caleb shot the fuse crate beside him. Fire erupted, men diving for cover. Chaos swallowed the bridge. From below, Lark crawled along the beams, hands raw from splinters. The river thundered beneath her feet, spray cold on her face. She found the fuse rope, thick, tar-coated, running from the train to the stacked dynamite near the supports. She drew her knife, sawing through. Gunfire cracked above. Caleb fired back, reloading between gusts. One bullet grazed his sleeve. Isaiah's rifle answered from the ridge, taking down 2 men at once. Smoke mixed with sand until friend and foe blurred into shadow. Lark's knife slipped. The rope frayed but held. She pulled again, teeth gritted. A flare dropped from above, hissing. She jerked back as it hit the beam, fire leaping along the tar line toward the crates. Damn it, Caleb muttered. He jumped from the track, grabbed a crowbar, and smashed the glowing fuse halfway along the line. The flame died, but sparks still crawled toward the powder. Lark reached the final knot, slicing fast. The last thread gave way just as the first crate ignited. The shockwave blew splinters around her. She clung to a beam, coughing. Above, the rail buckled, sending crates tumbling into the flood. Through the smoke, a figure rose at the far end of the bridge. Sheriff Kepler, soaked, half his face burned, eyes wild. Somehow he'd lived. Hart! He shouted over the roar. You think drowning me changes the law? Pike's dead, but his contracts still own you. Caleb leveled his gun. Then this bullet's for every contract. Before he could fire, Kepler turned his weapon toward Lark below. Then she dies with your curse. He pulled the trigger. Nothing. Wet powder. A click, then silence. Isaiah's voice rang from the ridge. Law's over, Tom. One clean shot dropped the sheriff, his body sliding into the mud. The storm howled louder. Caleb crawled toward the edge. Lark, you alive? Below, she clung to the beam, hair plastered with rain. She looked up and lifted her hand, a small circle over her heart. He understood. Still here. Together they hauled her up. The train lay half off the bridge, steam shrieking. Isaiah sprinted across, unhooking the last car. We gotta go before this whole damn thing falls. Caleb nodded. They ran for the ridge as the structure groaned behind them. Halfway across, a thunderclap split the sky. The remaining dynamite ignited. The Sable Bridge collapsed in a cascade of fire and splintered timber, plunging into the torrent below. The explosion lit the canyon like dawn. Caleb and the others reached the far side, thrown to the ground by the shockwave. When the sound faded, only the roar of water remained. Where the bridge once stood, a new gap had opened. Free, clear, unstoppable. Lark crawled to the edge, staring at the river rushing east. For the first time, its sound was pure, not stolen, not silenced. Caleb sat beside her. You saved it, he said softly. She turned, fingers signing a single phrase. We saved each other. Isaiah approached, breathing hard. That was hell of a light show. Think anyone's left to fight us? Caleb looked toward the fading storm. Plenty, but they'll have to cross without a bridge. Morning broke slow and silver over the valley. Mist rose from the new river that cut through the ruins of Sable Bridge, curling like breath from a sleeping giant. Caleb Hart stood on the ridge with Lark Whitfield and Isaiah Cole, watching the sun lift through the haze. The flood had carved a new channel across Hart's draw, wide, shimmering, alive. What had been dry earth yesterday now whispered like wind over glass. Isaiah spat into the mud. Can't believe it. Blue coil's running again. Caleb nodded. Took half the valley to make it happen. He knelt, dipped his hand into the water. It was cold, clean, untouched by the mine's poison. He stared at his reflection rippling beneath the surface. The same eyes, but lighter somehow. Behind them, the survivors of Calamita gathered. Farmers, widows, ranch hands, miners without pay, all drawn by the sight of the living spring. Word had spread before dawn. The water's back. At the head of the crowd rode Adaya Nantan, robes damp with dew, feathers braided into his hair. He dismounted, stepping toward Caleb. You broke the chain, Adaya said. The land breathes again. Caleb rose. It cost more than I wanted to pay. The land always collects its due. Isaiah scanned the crowd. Where's Pike's men? Gone, Adaya said. Those who didn't drown rode east before dawn. Their master's house burned. Lark glanced up sharply. Adaya met her eyes. Yes, Rosa Delgado lit the fuse herself. She bought you a sunrise. Caleb exhaled slow, throat tight. Damn fool woman. Adiah smiled faintly. She'd call it justice. They walked together to the riverbank. Adiah knelt, cupped water in his hands, whispered words in Mescalero tongue. Time 400. The crowd fell silent. He poured the water back gently and turned to Caleb. This spring belongs to no man, not you, not me, but the council agrees. You will keep it, if you keep it for all. Caleb met his gaze. You'll have my word. Words dry, deeds stay wet, Adiah said, then handed him a carved wooden token etched with a spiral. Symbol of guardianship. 2 peoples, 1 well. Lark stepped forward, palms open. Adiah nodded to her, laying his hand over hers. You heard it before we did, he said softly. Keep listening. The earth likes your kind. Later, the townsfolk worked shoulder to shoulder, clearing debris, digging channels to guide the new flow toward fields. For the first time in years, laughter rose from Calamita's dust. Children splashed in the shallows. Women filled buckets, marveling at how clear the water ran. Isaiah leaned on a shovel. Never thought I'd see these people work without a gun behind them. Caleb smiled faintly. Guess hope's stronger than a bullet. By noon, the sheriff's office, what was left of it, served as makeshift hall. Caleb placed the burned ledger on the table, its pages fused by fire. Beside it lay the minor contracts Rosa had smuggled out before she died. The town clerk, trembling, stamped them void. A government rider arrived near dusk, wearing a clean suit and a city badge. By authority of the territorial court, he said, Judge Pike's estate is forfeited. All claims revert to prior holders. Caleb crossed his arms. Then they revert to the people. The clerk nodded. With your consent, yes. You got it. As the rider left, Isaiah clapped Caleb on the shoulder. You just gave away a fortune. Was never mine to keep, Caleb said. That night, torches lined the riverbank. The people of Calamita gathered for what Adiah called the returning fire, a ceremony of thanks. Drums thudded slow, echoing through the valley. Caleb stood beside Lark near the water's edge, both barefoot, the ground cool beneath them. Adiah's voice rose. The spring has memory. It remembers theft and mercy the same. Let it carry what was broken and bring back what still breathes. Lark stepped forward first. She knelt, drawing a small spiral in the mud. Then she looked at Caleb and nodded. He took the turquoise stone from his pocket and set it at the spiral's center. The firelight turned it the color of morning sky. A hush fell. Even the river seemed to pause. Then, as if answering, a faint vibration rippled through the ground, soft, rhythmic, alive. Lark smiled, eyes bright with reflected flame. Caleb realized she was hearing something none of them could, the sound of the earth forgiving itself. When the drums stopped, Adiah raised a torch high. From this day, Hart's draw belongs to both sky and soil. May its keepers walk quiet. The crowd cheered. Children tossed flower petals into the current. Isaiah muttered, Never thought we'd end in peace. Caleb chuckled. Don't speak too soon. Peace is just the start of another kind of fight. He looked at Lark, who watched the water with quiet wonder. You hear it? He asked. She nodded, signing with slow, deliberate grace. It says thank you. The night deepened. Stars mirrored in the new river like silver coins. Caleb sat on the bank beside her, shoulders brushing. She reached into her satchel, pulling out a folded scrap of parchment. Rosa's map, now useless but treasured. She handed it to him. On the back, Rosa's final words were scrawled. When the water returns, so does the truth. He read it twice and then folded it carefully and slipped it into his coat. Guess she kept her word. Lark looked at him, then the horizon. So did you, she signed. They stayed until the last torch burned out, the river glimmering faint beneath the starlight. The desert was breathing again. Spring settled soft over Hart's draw, the valley now a living vein of water and green. The wind no longer carried dust, but the scent of sage and wild iris. Fences gleamed new under the sun, and the rhythm of hammers replaced the sound of gunfire. Caleb Hart stood at the edge of the pasture, leaning on the fence he'd rebuilt with his own hands. The turquoise stone hung from a nail on the post, catching the morning light. Behind him, laughter carried from the yard. The first children from Calamita had come to learn from Lark Whitfield, the woman who listened to the earth. She knelt in the grass beside a young colt, guiding the children's small palms to its flank. Feel, she whispered, shaping the word carefully with her lips so they could see. Not hear, feel. The colt shifted, and the children gasped, wide-eyed. Caleb watched from a distance, a smile tugging at his mouth. Isaiah Cole strolled up, wiping sweat from his brow. Never thought your ranch'd turn into a school. Caleb chuckled. Wasn't my idea. She's got them listening better than half the preachers I've met. Maybe that's what this place needed. A bit more listening, less talking. They walked toward the house. The roof was freshly tarred, the porch swept clean. A pot of coffee steamed by the door. Inside, new life hummed. The ticking clock, the soft murmur of a woman humming tunelessly. It took Caleb a second to realize the sound came from Lark. That night, when the sun dipped low, he found her sitting by the hearth, mending an old saddlebag. The firelight danced in her hair. On the table beside her lay Rosa's folded map, now blank on the back. The ink faded by time. Caleb poured 2 mugs of coffee and sat down. You've got the town believing you talk to horses, rivers, ghosts, he said. She looked up, smiling faintly. Then she traced the sign for listen. I'm listening, he said. She wrote slowly on her slate. Do you still hear the land? He thought about it, then nodded. Not like you do, but sometimes, when it's quiet, I think I feel it. Outside, the night breathed steady. Frogs croaked near the water's edge. Lark set the slate down and reached for his hand, guiding his palm to her chest. Here, she whispered, her voice soft, halting but clear. You hear now. Caleb felt her heartbeat, strong and even. Always did, he said. Weeks passed. The ranch thrived. The townsfolk brought offerings, jars of honey, hand-carved toys, dried herbs, to trade for water and peace. The mescalero sent seeds to plant along the stream, so its banks would hold against floods. And at the center of it all, Lark's garden bloomed wild with color. One evening, while repairing a fence near the east field, Caleb noticed riders approaching. A small group led by a man in a federal coat. They dismounted, polite but cautious. The leader handed him an envelope sealed with wax. "From Santa Fe," he said, "the governor's office." Caleb broke the seal, scanning the letter. It was an offer, territorial recognition of the Blue Coil Reserve, co-managed by the Hart Ranch and the Mescalero Council. Beneath the official script, one line stood out: "In honor of the citizens who restored what greed had buried." He looked up. "Tell the governor we'll keep it safe." The rider nodded. He figured you would. That night, as celebration filled the yard, a Daya arrived bearing a cedar staff carved with the spiral of blue coil. "For the keeper," he said. Caleb hesitated, then passed it to Lark. Adaya smiled. "The land chose her long before it chose you." Caleb nodded. "I know." Under the lantern glow, the townsfolk danced slow circles around the fire. Isaiah played harmonica, the notes drifting over the water like wind. Caleb stood beside Lark, their shoulders brushing. "You ever miss the silence?" he asked. She looked up at the sky. "No. Silence never left. It just learned to sing." They sat on the old bench beneath the cottonwood tree, watching the children chase fireflies along the stream. Caleb took a deep breath, the scent of rain on distant hills filling his lungs. "This place don't feel haunted anymore," he said. "It never was," Lark replied, her voice barely above the rustle of leaves. "It was waiting." He turned to her. "For what?" She smiled. "For someone to hear it." She reached into her apron pocket and drew out the braided horsehair cord she'd made long ago, the one that once pulled him from the phone. She looped it around his wrist. "So you don't forget." He touched the turquoise stone hanging from his neck. "Won't." The wind shifted, carrying the cool breath of the river. Lark leaned against him, head resting on his shoulder. Across the valley, the faint shimmer of blue coil reflected the stars, a ribbon of silver winding into forever. Far off, thunder murmured again, but this time it wasn't warning, only the sound of rain coming to bless the new season. Out here in the quiet heart of the West, some stories don't fade. They settle, like dust after rain. The tale of Caleb Hart and Lark Whitfield reminds us that even in the harshest land, kindness can take root, and love can find its own language when words fall short. The old spring of blue coil wasn't just water. It was the sound of forgiveness, of second chances that belong to anyone who's ever carried regret and still chosen hope. If this story touched your heart, friend, take a moment to let us know in the comments below. Tell us what part spoke to you, or share your own memories of love that endured time and silence. Your thoughts keep these Western tales alive. Please give this video a like if it stirred something in you, and subscribe so you won't miss our next journey through the wild heart of the frontier, where justice rides slow but always arrives, and love still whispers in the wind. Until we meet again on another trail, may your days be peaceful, your coffee strong, and your heart always listening. Thank you for being part of our Western family.